All right, the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. And good morning to everyone, and we welcome you. This hearing is entitled An Overview of the Fiscal Year 2012 Research and Development Budget Proposals at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency. In front of you packets containing the written testimony, biography, and truth in testimony disclosure for today's witnesses. Our first panel will feature NOAA Administrator Dr. Jane Lubachenko. Our second panel will feature EPA Assistant Administrator for the Office of Research and Development, Dr. Paul Anastas. All right, who do we go with? And I recognize myself for an opening statement. I want to welcome everyone here today for the hearing on the President's Fiscal Year 2012 budget request for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that's NOAA, and the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. In the first 2 months of the year, the President made two important praiseworthy announcements. He called for a review of the unnecessary regulations, such as those under which the benefits don't justify the cost or those not grounded in sound science. Then he announced during his State of the Union speech that he would be willing to eliminate whatever spending we can honestly afford to do without. The President has followed these announcements by proposing a budget with over $1 trillion in deficit spending and pushing a bevy of job-killing regulations without heed to current economic conditions. In light of his stated priorities, the President's actions on the budget and regulations are appearing to be empty promises. The President's FY 2012 budget request for NOAA contains few surprises, but several concerns. The administration has proposed the largest reorganization in NOAA history in order to create a new climate service. As I said at last year's budget hearing, I'm not supportive of this change and concerned that it has not been properly vetted by Congress. I do, however, want to acknowledge to the administrator that I appreciate that this proposal was made through the budget process this year. This is a regular order we were requesting a year ago. Nevertheless, this committee has not yet had the opportunity to fully examine the implications of transition and fundamental climate research into an operational office. Until and unless Congress reviews and approves the proposal, I don't expect NOAA to continue to operate as it did prior to the February 2010 announcement. There should be no changes in the existing management matrix, no changes in decision-making or reporting lines within the line offices, and no authorities changed under the guise of transition. Another area of the President's budget that concerns me is the proposed increases for the Joint Polar Satellite System. This committee has been engaged in the oversight of this program since it was a dysfunctional tri-agency mess, subject to the recertification under non-McCurdy. It's been more than a year since the Office of Science and Technology Policy proposed splitting this program into two elements, one controlled by NOAA and NASA, and a separate one controlled by the Department of Defense. And all this time, we've not seen how the division of this program has worked and to whether or not it'll reduce the risk of a potential gap in weather and climate data. Furthermore, we have still not seen the baseline cost estimates of these two separate programs. I look forward to hearing from the administration on this subject. Our second panel, we will hear about EPA's FY 2012 Research and Development Budget Request. We're all well aware of the great impact that EPA regulatory actions can have. Often overlooked in this debate, however, is agency process and how it affects the quality of the underlying science that these regulations are based on. This is the purview of the committee and an issue I'm committed to pursue in further detail. For example, since our last EPA budget hearing, more information has come to light that the science used to justify the finding that carbon dioxide is a danger to public health or welfare is not as solid as was originally claimed. The numerous admitted mistakes, questionable data sets, and lack of transparency in the process has only intensified the questions and doubts that this decision was made as a result of politics instead of science. Unfortunately, climate is not the only area in which EPA science is a concern. I was very disappointed with the release of the draft hydraulic fracturing study. The questions EPA posed to answer would hardly be helpful to a decision maker. This study is focused on the impact possibilities of hydraulic fracturing on drinking water without even looking at the possibilities of such an impact occurring. It seems about as useful as studying the possible impacts of getting hit by a bus without ever even considering the probability of such an event occurring when even existing laws and when simple precautionary steps are taken. Accordingly, I look forward to hearing further from EPA on the factors driving the hydraulic fracturing study. There's a lot of work to be done to put our country back on the right track, and the President's budget request is not the roadmap that will get us there. I now recognize the ranking member, Mrs. Johnson, for 5 minutes or whatever time she might require on her opening statement. I thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. And let me also wish to welcome the witnesses, Dr. Lubchenko and later Dr. Anastas, to the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. While the two sides of the aisle might not always agree on the appropriate resources and directions for NOAA and EPA, I think that we all agree that good policy begins with good science. Testifying today are two of the nation's top scientists running two of our premier science agencies. Not only is this hearing a venue for members to ask questions and express concerns, it should serve as an opportunity for our witnesses to convey the importance of what these agencies do for the American people. From forecasting the weather and assessing the impacts of the changing climate on our economy, to protecting public health for ensuring cleaner air and water and the development of safer chemicals. In these and a host of other ways, NOAA and EPA conduct science to benefit our lives every day, and in ways often too easily overlooked by the fog, often of partisan politics. It is important to note that the unique jurisdiction that this committee has in EPA, and acknowledge that with the Office of Research and Development and all of the science and technology activities, EPA is not just a regulatory agency. We must not lose sight of the contribution that science activities at EPA have provided to the public for decades. Our environment does not just get better by itself. It requires all of us working together to protect every American's right to clean air and water and a healthier environment. We're here today to discuss the President's fiscal year 2012 budget request for NOAA and EPA. However, it is difficult to discuss the outlook for the next fiscal year when we have not yet determined the funding levels for this current fiscal year and assess the full extent of the damage that the lack of fiscal final budget is causing. In these challenging economic times, we need not sacrifice everything for the sake of making cuts. With vision and perseverance, we can be fiscally responsible while still making the necessary investments to keep the American economy competitive and our people and environment healthy. The President has already made some tough decisions in the 2012 budget request for these agencies. However, the much deeper cuts included in H.R. 1 that passed the House 3 weeks ago would put these and other agencies at risk of failing to meet their missions. At least we must ask ourselves whether the very negligible effect these cuts will have on the national deficit warrants the devastation it will cause to our core scientific programs, their critical workforce and infrastructure, and their capacity to address natural disasters and protect public health and the environment. If cuts on the order of those in House Bill H.R. 1 were enacted, thousands of research scientists, graduate students, technical and administrative staff, contractors, and other support staff across the country would be laid off or furloughed, and at a time when we are trying to protect American jobs. Critical research activities to develop new technologies and methods to protect the public from environmental hazards and monitor long-term environmental change will be stopped or curtailed. Weather forecasting systems may fail, creating gaps in critical weather data, eroding weather services that every American relies on. we would no longer see the 2 or 3 day advance warnings of extreme events putting lives, property, and critical infrastructure at risk. These cuts don't take us back to 2008. They will turn the clock back and take us back to relying on the weather forecasting capabilities and environmental protection standards for over 2 decades ago. America wants us to be fiscally responsible, but if they can't breathe clean air and drink clean water, help communities and industry prepare for harsh weather and natural disaster, what does that really mean? Dr. Lupchino and Dr. Nastas, as you testify today, perhaps the most important assistance you can give to this committee is a real understanding of how the proposed cuts will affect your agency's ability to protect the health and well-being of our citizens and communities, and why you believe the President's request will move our nation's science enterprise in the right direction. Chairman Hall and all of the members of this committee, I look forward to working with you in the months ahead, and I look forward to hearing our witnesses. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. And let me say, we're going to try to stay with the 5-minute rule. It's not fair to those at the end. Mr. Sarbanes, for example, has stayed, I think, 2.5 hours and didn't get to ask a question last time. I'm inclined to give him my time. He's so patient, or give him the award for patience here, Nobel Prize for patience. But I'll introduce the first panel witness and ask the witnesses to be as direct as you can. Please do your best to stay with the 5-minute deal. But if you can't, we're honored to have you here, and we'll be lenient with the gavel. At this time, I'd like to introduce our first panel witness, Dr. Jane Lubachenko, and I hope I'm saying that right. People mispronounce Hall every now and then, but put an E in it where there's an A, but I don't like that. Prior to her service as administrator at NOAA, she served as president of the American Society for the Advancement of Science, a professor at Harvard and Oregon State University, and she was also on the board of directors for the National Science Foundation. She was sworn in on March 20th, 2009, and this is the 3rd time she's appeared before the committee, and we thank you for being here. As our witnesses should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes, after which the members of the committee will have 5 minutes each to ask questions. Before I recognize Dr. Lubachenko, I want to ask you to please do your best to stay within that. Thank you. We recognize you now, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Chairman Hall, I greatly appreciate your leadership and your support for NOAA. As you know, we are one of the nation's premier environmental science and stewardship agencies. Your continued support for our program is appreciated as we work within the Department of Commerce to improve science, products, and services that are vital to supporting America's businesses, communities, and people. At NOAA, our work is everyone's business. I'm honored to be here today to discuss the President's FY 2012 budget request, which promotes innovation and American competitiveness and lays the foundation for long-term economic growth while making responsible reductions. The budget recognizes the central role that science and technology play in creating jobs and improving the health and security of Americans. I wish in my oral remarks to highlight 5 linchpins of our FY12 request: key savings, climate services, research and innovation, weather, and satellites. Savings highlights. As part of the administration's Administrative Efficiency Initiative, NOAA analyzed its administrative costs and reduced non-essential spending by $67.7 million. We conducted a rigorous review of our programs and activities and identified additional savings. The 2012 request is $5.5 billion, a decrease from FY 2011 request, and an increase above FY 2010 enacted, due primarily to our requirements to execute the restructured civil polar satellite program. The FY 12 request includes a proposed budget-neutral reorganization that brings together NOAA's existing but widely dispersed climate capabilities under a single line office management structure called the Climate Service. The Climate Service, if approved by Congress, would have a budget of $346 million. A key point to keep in mind is that many people think of climate as something that's far down the road, something way in the future. However, the word climate generally refers to long-term weather, specifically anything longer than 2 weeks. People are anxious to have information to plan for the months and years ahead, and we believe the Climate Service can assist in a meaningful fashion. The proposed reorganization would also strengthen world-class fundamental science for which NOAA is justly known. This committee has repeatedly said that this goal is important to you. It's equally important to NOAA and to me. Without continued advances in basic science that supports our mission, the quality of our services will degrade. The climate services we provide demonstrate the utility of continually improving our scientific capacity. For example, through collaboration with the National Association of Home Builders and HUD, NOAA developed an air freezing index that the home building industry estimates saves $300 million annually in construction costs and the equivalent of 9 million gallons of gasoline. Advances in science make it possible for us to provide useful information about the months to year time frame, something that has potential to be of immense utility to businesses, communities, and military operations. In parallel to creating the Climate Service, NOAA would strengthen and realign its core research line office. The Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research will focus its work to be the innovator and incubator of new science, technologies, and application within NOAA, and an integrator of science and technology across all of NOAA, consistent with the President's call for science and innovation. NOAA's request includes $212 million to continue strengthening core capacities, such as our understanding of ocean acidification and its impacts, and promoting conservation and use of America's coastal resources through our renowned Sea Grant program. The National Weather Service provides critical information to communities and emergency managers and is the nation's first line of defense against severe weather. The FY12 request for the service is $988 million. This includes a $26.9 million increase to modernize our aviation weather forecasts and warnings to support next-gen developmental activities. NOAA's satellites provide the data and information for forecasters that are vital to every citizen. They enable smart construction and emergency rescue missions, safe transportation, whether it's on land, water, or in the oceans and Great Lakes. The FY12 budget request for the satellite service is $2 billion, which we will invest in multiple satellite acquisition programs for the continuity of critical weather, climate, and oceanographic data. This includes an increase of $687 million for the Joint Polar Satellite System. This program is essential if we are to maintain the quality of our severe storm warnings, provide long-term forecasts, and receive emergency distress signals in timely fashion. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I would like to note that I'm holding a nickel in my hand here. I believe that this nickel represents one of the best bargains I know of. It costs Americans, each American, less than 5 cents a day to run NOAA. And for this nickel, you get the best weather information in the world. This nickel means that our oceans and coasts are healthy and vibrant, and in turn, our coastal communities are more prosperous. This nickel gives mariners the confidence that their distress signals will be received. This nickel allows us to save lives and property when severe storms strike. This nickel helps business owners succeed, from the farmers in the heartland to fishermen on the coasts and everywhere in between. This nickel helps keep our homeland secure. At NOAA, our work is everyone's business. We take our work seriously because we know that citizens and businesses depend upon us each and every day. I look forward to working with members of the committee and our constituents to achieve these goals. I've laid out through the implementation of the 2012 budget, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that the committee might have. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Again, reminding committee rules that we stay within the 5 minutes. Chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for questions. First, I would like to ask you, NOAA is requesting, I think, more than $2 billion for the National Environmental Satellite Service, but it's not all just for Joint Polar Satellite System or Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite, or better known as JPSS or GOES. Arguably, NOAA's 2 highest priority satellite systems. If you're prioritizing missions in this very difficult economy, why are you spending resources on Jason 3, which is a satellite that measures sea level rise, a climate change observation, while at the same time warning Congress that if we do not spend money on weather satellites, there'll be a data gap?
Mr. Chairman, we believe that all of the satellite requests in this FY12 budget request are highly important and very useful to the American public. Jason 3 is a satellite program that is joint with the Europeans and therefore saves the United States a considerable amount of money because we pool our resources, giving communities along coastal regions information about sea level rise is vitally important to their planning for the future. This particular satellite system is essential in providing that high-resolution information that enables communities to plan and to plan in a way that is smart planning.
I thank you for that answer, but you know that you can't have both, and don't you need to prioritize within this economy? And we know we can't afford everything, so can't you prioritize it? And I ask you that question with your knowing how I feel about it. I think weather is, by any reasonable person, much more important than sea level change. And we can't have everything we want. I know you want the best for them, want the best for the country, but can't you prioritize those?
Mr. Chairman, we have prioritized the items that are in the budget. There were a number of other very important satellite programs that were not included in this request. And so what we have reflected here is, in fact, a prioritization. The Joint Polar Satellite System to which you refer is, without doubt, one of the most important satellite programs that we have. It is essential for us to be able to have the information it provides to do long-term forecasts, to predict severe storms such as hurricanes, to provide the search and rescue information, to receive the beacons that search and rescue operations entail, and to provide weather information in general for Alaska. So it's an absolutely critical system. That doesn't mean that Jason is unimportant. It's important for a different reason.
I don't agree with your answers, but I respect you for not taking my full 5 minutes. I don't want you to filibuster me now. I have another question I hope I can get in 5 minutes. As you may be aware, my amendment to the continuing resolution would prohibit NOAA from using funds to, quote, implement a NOAA climate service, unquote. It passed 233 to 187 by the Congress, formally establishing the House of Representatives' opposite position against a NOAA climate service in FY 2011. You're aware of that, aren't you? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
And in my statement on the House floor, I argued that I was concerned that implementation of the climate service was already underway in the form of significant planning, transitioning, and reorganization. Give me a yes or no answer to that. Is that true?
Mr. Chairman, before this administration began,
Can't you give me a yes or no to that?
planning began in the last administration for a climate service, and planning continues, but we have not implemented a climate service because Congress has not approved.
Just to reiterate the assurances you wrote to me in a letter this January, NOAA is not yet implementing the climate service. Is this correct?
That's correct.
And the lines of reporting for daily operations of NOAA have not changed from the structure that was in place January 2010. Is this correct?
Yes, sir.
I asked the last question. NOAA will wait for congressional approval before implementing any such climate service. Is this a yes?
Yes, sir, it is. Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to go back. I thank you. I have 8 seconds left. That's just in time for me to recognize Mrs. Johnson. I thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Satellite coverage is essential for us to monitor Earth, forecast weather, and protect lives and property. You know, I fly back and forth home just about every weekend, as many other members here do. And very often, we depend on the forecast to determine whether we can have to change our plans or go later or land somewhere that's not home. And I am wondering, I was told by Mr. Bolden that these satellites are getting rather old, and that while we can't predict the life of them, they are far beyond what had been predicted. And so I'm wondering now about the development of the next generation of this polar orbiting weather satellites. GAO has indicated that JPSS has an inadequate funding plan, and I am concerned that both the continued stalemate over the fiscal year 2011 budget and the House passed H.R. 1 will lead to new cost growth and schedule delays that will set the program back even further. What impact is the 2011 continuing resolution budget having on your ability to make any progress to keep us safe?
Congresswoman, thank you so much for asking about the Joint Polar Satellite System. It is a vitally important tool that we have that provides essential information to being able to do a number of things. This program is vital to the American public in many different ways. It is essential, these polar orbiting satellites are essential for our ability to predict severe storms. If we want to be, our ability today to provide hurricane forecasts that are as accurate as they are today with 2 to 3 days advance warning are a direct result of the information that we get from the polar orbiting satellites. So too is the information from those satellites to provide long-term weather forecasts. The short-term weather information that we have comes from different satellites, the ones we call geostationary. But the polar orbiting satellite of which we're speaking now is essential for the long-term forecasts. And that's very, very important for the military in making decisions about troop deployments or refueling planes in air. It's also essential for farmers deciding what crops to plant or when. So both severe storm warnings and the long-term forecast depend on these polar orbiting satellites. Also very important to many individuals, especially mariners, are the ability of these satellites to receive signals from emergency distress beacons. Without this satellite system, we would probably at least double the response time for search and rescue missions. And obviously in an emergency, a matter of minutes is often critically important, and so doubling the response time is certainly problematic. So for all of those reasons, the polar orbiting satellite system is critically important. We currently need, in this fiscal year, in FY11, $910 million to keep this program underway. That is not an insignificant amount. I fully appreciate what a large number that is. But the consequences of not having it are very severe. And for every dollar that we do not spend this year on this program, it will cost us $3 to $5 in the future to build this program back up. If we don't have those resources this year, we terminate contracts, we lose people that have the expertise, and the consequences of that will not be pretty.
Thank you very much. My time is about expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I recognize the gentleman, longtime member of this committee, very valuable member, Mr. Rohrbacher from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me note that my very first job when I was a gopher in the news business was to read the following into a machine when I arrived in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning at the News Bureau. Good morning. This is the National Weather Service forecast for Los Angeles and vicinity. Today, the high will be at Civic Center, 75 degrees. Low expected tonight at 62. Coastal Orange County, high as well, will be 72 degrees, a low of 65, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I appreciated that job. And
Could we have a new reading, another reading of that?
well, I thought I was very proud to give the National Weather Service forecast, and that was very important news, actually. And we got all kinds of hits on that. It was a telephone service, and thousands and thousands of people called in every day from Los Angeles to get their weather. And I would hope that what you are doing now in your restructuring of NOAA so that you now have a climate service, that does not distract from the important work that your organization has been doing in terms of weather. So I guess maybe what I should ask is, will this change of name and structure into the climate service, will it in any way distract from the resources? Will you then be transferring resources from weather to spending those resources on things like human adaptation for the change in climate that may take centuries in order to see that change?
Congressman Rohrabacher, thank you for highlighting how important the National Weather Service
Yes,
is.
it is.
It's vitally important to save lives and property, and it is widely recognized as being so. The 122 weather forecast offices we have around the nation will be delighted to have heard your rendition and to recognize their importance. The budget request for the National Weather Service for this year increases the number of very important areas that are essential for the investments in fundamental science that enable us to continue to get better and better at our forecasts. And in fact, we have seen significant improvements in our forecasts, but there is ample room for more, and this budget requests a number of items to advance that agenda. Aviation weather, which is vitally important, we have an increase targeted for that for the operation and maintenance of our weather buoys that give us vital information about what's happening over the ocean. For weather and climate supercomputers, I would highlight those three areas where there are
How much
increases.
money would you expect? With all these things I support, that's great. We all do. They're very significant to the jobs and well-being of Americans. But when you get to the idea of predicting the climate so that you will have adaptation, and of course my reading of that is that we're talking about ocean rise, which may take a century or 2 centuries for us to see it. Where's the money coming? How much is being spent on adaptation versus weather? And where's the money coming from if it's not coming from what you were doing in weather?
Congressman, the creation of the Climate Service, the proposed creation of the Climate Service, entails an internal reorganization that does not change the basic functions of the different offices that they are currently executing. It puts those offices together in a way that they can be more effective in delivering the kind of not just short-term 10-day weather, but longer-term weather information that is properly called climate, but that is actually months to years out. For example, you know that this is a La Nina year, and therefore we can analyze past La Nina years and predict that under these circumstances, we know that this will be we can tell you something about precipitation for
And that's
Southern
very,
California.
that's very important to a lot of people, and especially in California.
It-
Just hope that type of service that you provide so well now isn't undercut by some of the more trendy foo-foo things like we have seen. I won't go into detail, but we've seen that here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Gentleman's time expired. Now recognize Mr. Miller, gentleman from North Carolina, is a ranking member on energy and environment for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Luchenko, one of the certainly a difficult task that the administration faced was dealing with an oil spill that wasn't supposed to happen. And in some ways, the administration acquitted itself well, and in others less well. But could you please explain how you are going to work with other agencies to monitor and understand what the effect of the oil has been and the long-term fate of the oil? We heard a lot about how well it's being dispersed, how it's being absorbed, degrading, whatever. What is the plan going forward?
Congressman, part of NOAA's responsibilities with respect to not only Deepwater Horizon spill but other oil spills is to participate actively in the process that's known as the Natural Resource Damage Assessment Process, or NRDA. This is a legal, scientific, and economic process that is done in conjunction with the federal trustees, of which NOAA, in the Department of Commerce, the Department of the Interior, Department of Defense are the 3 federal trustees, and there are 5 state trustees. And those trustees work collectively together to evaluate the impact that the spill had on natural resources in the Gulf and the public's loss to those natural resources, and build a court case to take, if necessary, to court in order to get the resources to do restoration. NOAA is providing much of the scientific underpinnings for that evaluation of the damage that was done because of the spill to these natural resources and the public's loss to them. That's a process that's well underway. Some damages are very easy to see, oiled birds, oiled turtles or dolphins. Others are much more difficult to measure directly. Impacts of small droplets of oil on fish eggs or fish larvae, for example, or crabs or shrimp. And so this is a process that necessarily needs to take the appropriate amount of time. We are conducting multiple research expeditions on ship, as well as very considerable activities on the shore, and have been pretty much since the beginning of the spill, in order to evaluate the damage that was done.
Dr. Luchenko, unlike Mr. Rohrabacher, I've never depended for my livelihood on your weather products, but I recognize their importance. Could you tell us how what you do in weather forecasting or in weather generally is going to be affected by the proposed cuts that were included by H.R. 1, the continuing resolution that the House passed a few weeks ago?
Congressman Miller, I don't, the cuts, it's difficult to say the exact consequences of H.R. 1 on specific programs because we don't have that fine-tuned information. What I can tell you is that it's likely to be very devastating to our ability to continue to provide the kind of weather information that Americans depend upon to save lives, to save property. The cuts are of a nature that there would be significant hits throughout NOAA's programs, and we have very grave concerns about exactly what those would look like.
Okay. You distinguished in your testimony between climate and weather. Can you tell us how weather forecasting really fits in with climate forecasting, and is it important that we have climate predictions, and why?
Congressman, there really is a continuum between weather and climate. I think Mark Twain famously said that climate is what you expect and weather is what you get. And in fact, it really is a continuum. The ways that scientists go about making predictions and forecasts about either weather or climate entail different types of models. Weather forecasting models are fundamentally different from climate forecasting models. The weather models are very short-term. They are initialized with current immediate conditions. They take into account changes in the atmosphere that are happening now and look out a number of days to a week or so. So we have 7 to 10-day forecasts. Those are different types of models from climate models, which are farther out. So 15 days and farther out are a different type of model, which is why we say, distinguish between climate and weather. Both are vitally important, and one of the major research challenges now is to bring those models together so that we have better resolution of what's happening in the near, not just the short term, but the medium scale that has been very, very difficult because of the need to merge those models. Both are very, very important. We are getting absolutely inundated with requests for information that is months to years to decades out, not centuries, but people want to plan and know what water managers, for example, or city planners or farmers are trying to evaluate what should they plan for next year or for the next year. And it's that type of information where we see a huge opportunity to provide what we call climate services that will help in that type of planning.
Thank you.
This time recognize Congressman Bartlett, the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much. As you know, there's an indisputable fact that atmospheric CO2 is rising. Nobody disagrees on that. The effects are in considerable dispute. There are a number of people who believe that because CO2 is a greenhouse gas that it will warm the earth, absent other causes. This will cause short-term climate changes and acidification of the ocean. Climate changes could be disruptive. The acidification of the ocean could be catastrophic in the long run. And ultimately, if we really do get warmer, the sea level will rise. There are a number of people who think this is all a bunch of hooey, and they keep criticizing this. But I want to point out that there are two other constituencies that have common cause in wanting exactly the same solution that the folk who are concerned about CO2 footprint want, and that is to move away from fossil fuels to renewables, because this will reduce the CO2 released into the atmosphere. One of those other groups are those who are concerned about national security. We have only 2% of the world's oil. We use 25% of the world's oil. We import 2/3 of what we use. The obvious solution to that is exactly the same solution that those people have who are concerned about CO2 increase and climate change and so forth, is to move away from fossil fuels to renewables. The third group that has common cause with this are those who understand, as Hyman Rickover did more than 50 years ago, that oil is finite. It will run out. The world almost certainly has now reached what we call peak oil, that is its maximum ability to produce oil. It's about 85 million barrels a day. We're stuck there, which is why our economies are in trouble, and it's not going to rise. And the solution to that problem, obviously, is to move away from fossil fuels to renewables so that the fossil fuels will last us longer and we'll have energy for our activities now. I hope that these three groups will stop sniping at each other's premise and lock arms and march forward, because although they have three very different agendas, they have exactly the same solution to these very different problems. Now for a question. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and obviously we have an enormous interest in climate and weather as we plan. What are you doing to make sure that your efforts are collaborative and you don't have duplicate efforts with the Department of Defense for weather?
Congressman, we work very closely with the Department of Defense and in particular with the Navy on a number of in a number of different ways, and those include both oceanographic information, weather information, and climate information on all of those fronts. We have active exchanges of information, and we as far as I know, there is no duplication of information. It's nicely complementary. We keep them informed of what we are doing. They keep us informed, at least to some extent, to what they are doing. And there are a number of venues in which that exist to keep that flow of information going. We know from what the Navy in particular, but DoD more generally have told us, is that what we provide to them is essential for their planning purposes, both short-term as well as long-term. I had the pleasure of visiting the aircraft carrier, the Harry S. Truman, about a year and a half ago now, and was amazed when I walked around inside the room that had all of the equipment to give them state-of-art information about what the conditions were when they were running war game exercises, and a vast number of the computers in the room were showing NOAA information, whether it was oceanographic models that they were running or weather information or whatever, nautical charts. And so we clearly have, even at the scale of a ship, a very tight collaboration and interaction, and I think it's a very productive exchange. They are very concerned about this joint polar satellite system and the potential loss of that system to our ability to provide the long-term weather forecasts for them that are very important in making decisions about troop deployments, for example. Although I'm sure there's always room for improvement in terms of interactions, I think we have a very productive interaction and exchange with the Department of Defense, but I would highlight the Navy in particular.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Lubchenco, for coming here this morning. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the reliability, the long-term reliability and the short-term reliability of the existing satellites, and how important this program is to making sure that we have reliable information. I hope I'm not beating a dead horse, but could you comment on that?
Congressman, are you referring specifically to the Joint Polar Satellite System or satellites in general?
No, the Joint Polar Satellite System.
There are currently polar satellites that are in space now that provide, there's one satellite that provides us with much of the information I described earlier that is absolutely essential for severe weather forecasts, for long-term weather forecasts, for search and rescue, and for weather in Alaska. These satellites orbit the poles and give us a very different type of information from a different type of satellite system, which are geostationary satellites. Those geostationary satellites, there's one that sits pretty much over the East Coast and sees the eastern half of the country. There's one that sits over the West Coast, and they stay in place and constantly see the same place. They are very high up. The polar orbiting satellites orbit at a much lower orbit and are essential to tracking what's coming across the Pacific, for example, or following storms as they are developing. The current satellite that is up there will not, it has a finite lifespan, and this joint polar satellite system is to build the satellite and the instruments to replace that satellite when it is no longer functional. The current CR has already resulted in a delay in that program of around 12 months additional delays because of lack of resources will delay that program even further. And what that means is that down the road, we will inevitably have a gap where we will not have the ability to do severe storm warnings as we do today.
So you're saying that this is inevitable at this point, that we will absolutely have a gap because of the longevity of the current polar satellites?
It is highly likely we will have a gap, and the longer we wait, the longer that gap gets. And if you consider that for each dollar that we don't spend this year on this program, it will cost $3 to $5 to bring that program up, even those additional resources will not close that gap. So there is great urgency in addressing this problem.
Thank you. Another thing I'd like to ask is about the need for a federal clearinghouse for climate data. And what I'd like to see is a lack of overlap or a lack of duplication in that regard. Do you see NOAA becoming a key player or a central player in terms of providing data to federal agencies and other agencies that are interested in climate data?
Congressman, we currently serve that function. We house much of the climate data and make it all publicly available. We routinely do peer reviews and quality checks to ensure that it is of the highest quality. We share that information very broadly. Last year, we reorganized the information that's available through our website to create a more user-friendly way to access all of the data and information that we have that concerns climate. There is ample opportunity to improve in that regard, and we will continue to do that. And the requests in the current budget are in part designed to help move that ahead.
Has there been any criticism? Has there been much criticism of the objectivity of that data or of the accuracy of that data?
Every investigation of those programs has concluded that it is very well run, that the data are trustworthy. They, in fact, are widely considered to be the gold standard.
Thank you. My time is up. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Lubchenco, for coming before the committee. I have 4 questions I'm going to ask. First is, when I look at the chart of the request, the fiscal year FY12 request is about 35% more than the FY08 request. Is that right? FY08 is $4.07 billion. FY12 5.49.
That's correct.
Okay, so what you're asking for is the American people at a time where everybody's tightening their belt, we're tightening everybody's belt, you want 35% more. Okay, and I'll go through the justifications in your testimony. Let me talk a little bit about some of that spending, because one of it goes to a satellite called Discover, which my understanding is going to spend tens of millions of dollars to put up an 11-year-old satellite bus. You're going to put new sensors on it, but in technology, why would we choose that path, spending tens of millions of dollars to refurbish an 11-year-old satellite bus instead of doing what I understand is available, which is letting a private company launch the same sensors and just buy the information? I mean, why are we doing something that a private company can do?
Congressman, the Discover satellite has been essentially kept in good shape, and the analyses that we did suggest this is the most cost-effective way to get critically important information by refurbishing it and then flying it.
Can you provide me a copy of that analysis?
Yes, sir.
Specifically versus going to a private?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go on to one other issue, 2 other issues that regard the fisheries. One is this idea of catch shares, because I think there is again, tens of millions of dollars going into establishing catch shares. And my understanding, talking with fishermen in Maryland, we have fishermen both in the bay and in the ocean, that one of the results has been to force smaller fishermen basically out of business. I mean, you just put them out of business. They can't afford to buy the catch shares to make a living that they would have to otherwise. So they end up selling them to larger corporations sometimes, literally corporations, who then go and just hire fishermen to catch. So we're putting the kind of the, I hate to say mom and pop fishermen, but mom and pop fishermen kind of out of business as small business owners. Is that in fact what does occur? I don't say all the time, but is that occurring? Is that what we've been observing to occur where we've established catch shares?
Congressman, thanks for raising that issue, because I think it's a common misconception about catch shares. Any particular catch share program depends on the way it is designed. And much of our focus now is helping to ensure that they are designed in a way that reflects the wishes of the fishermen in the area. And I think there is broad recognition that preventing consolidation is highly desirable. We are very strong champions of and believe that we need a diverse fleet and that the small boat fishermen are a vital component of that.
But my question is has that been observed, in fact, that the smaller boat fishermen, in fact, are driven out of the business as primary owners? I mean, they may end up working for one of these corporations that hold the catch share licenses, but is that, I met with a group who were put out of business in the scallops fishery off the Maryland coast. I sat across the table from them, so I know it exists. I mean, what's the experience nationally, though? Does that occur? Is that one of the things that has occurred? I know you're concerned in minimizing it, but is that
in some catch share
occurs?
programs that were not well designed, there have been individuals who have not been allocated a share. I think it's important to realize that fishermen don't have to buy a share. They are given a share that is based on their past fishing history. But the rules of design for a catch share program are determined by the fishery management councils on which fishermen sit, and so they have the opportunity.
Sure, I understand some fishermen sit on it. I understand that, and it's, again, it just kind of politicizes what's gone on in the private sector. Finally, there's a request for a $5 million increase for regional studies in the Chesapeake Bay. Are these grants? Who are going to get these? And the second one is, it says we're going to understand the relationship between some of the things that have to do with cleaning up the bay. And the next panel will have someone I'm going to ask specific about TMDLs, but don't you do the research before you establish the policies? I mean, what are we studying here with this $5 million, and who's that money going to?
Congressman, I frankly don't recall that specific program, and I would be happy to get that information to you. I know that we collaborate closely with other agencies as part of a larger focus on the Chesapeake, but I will get you information on exactly what our request is.
Yeah, thank you. In light of the GAO study that reports on multiple duplications, I'd love to see that, and I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would also like to thank the gentlelady from Maryland for her courtesy in permitting me to ask a couple of questions and also then fit in a few constituent meetings. Dr. Lubchenco, thank you for your service to our nation. We in the Pacific Northwest are very proud of your service. We followed your career earlier at Oregon State. It is a fine academic background, and we are very proud of your national service now. And in particular, I'd like to comment that in my studies of the catch share program, my fishermen are generally in favor of implementing a catch share program, and I would like to thank you. And I would like to thank Secretary Locke for making some adjustments so that our catch share program in the Pacific Northwest can be implemented sooner, which is what my fishermen would prefer to have happen. And secondly, with respect to this satellite program that has been the subject of some discussion, I would just like to insert in the record that as the former chair of the subcommittee with jurisdiction over that satellite program, I have developed more knowledge of that satellite program than I had ever hoped, even as someone who is very interested in satellites, that most importantly, this is a program that has had a track record in 3 administrations, not 1, not 2, but 3 administrations, a good half of the Clinton administration, all of the Bush administration for 8 years, and now a little bit of run time in the Obama administration. And while I have not agreed with all of the judgments made by each of the 3 administrations, I believe that the data from that satellite is necessary to establish some data independence from nations which may or may not always share data with us, but we hope that it is a sharing program and that data would permit us to participate in that sharing. I would like to ask you, Dr. Lubchenco, about a specific budget item in the NOAA budget, and that is that the NOAA budget has a specific proposal to create a structure for the NOAA Climate Service, and that this structure involves creating a new line office by performing a programmatic reorganization of existing resources. One of the primary line offices that is proposed to transfer over there is the research and program resources from the Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Office, or OAR. And OAR is the research enterprise of NOAA's basic and innovative research. This is very, very important. Dr. Lubchenco, how do you plan to balance the need to provide climate services based on good climate research, balancing that with the need to ensure OAR does not lose its current basic and innovative science-driven research?
Congressman Wu, it's nice to see you. Thank you very much for your nice comments. The CatShare program in the West Coast was 7 years in the making and has really benefited from considerable input by fishermen up and down the West Coast for the groundfish ITQ. And I'm very pleased that it has the support that it has and that the fishermen are telling you that they are pleased with it. I, too, have met with them a lot, and they are saying we can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're anxious to get underway with this program. You mentioned the Joint Polar Satellite System, which obviously is very, very high priority for us. Secretary Locke and I heard you and other members of Congress loudly and clearly when we first came in, and you said this is a flawed program, fix it. And I'm very proud of the actions that we have taken with the White House to put this program on a path to success. What is critical now is that we have the funding to be able to deliver on this new path, and I appreciate your attention to it because you recognize how vital it is. On your question with respect to the climate service, this is indeed an internal reorganization that is proposed. It would not change the research that anyone at NOAA is doing. It simply makes the research and services pieces be more tightly connected so that they can be more effective in providing climate information by way of services and data to the American public. It does not undermine research at NOAA. That's a high priority of mine, to strengthen scientific research. And I pledge to do everything I can to continue to have research be very strong in every line office. But we are looking to the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research to be the leader in innovation and integration of research. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. This time recognize Mrs. Adams, gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Lubchenco. Before I get started, I want to also reiterate what my colleague said about catch share. My fishermen, too, are concerned about that. and they have brought it to my attention, and I've met with several of them. They're worried about being put out of business by larger groups. And along that line, I'd like to talk to you for a moment about an issue which is a little bit really incredibly urgent matter, and it is something that I find very troubling. You're probably aware of, in July of 2008, your agency issued a letter to the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council that the South Atlantic red snapper stock is overfished and undergoing overfishing. This is a massive problem for the state of Florida. The decision is costing thousands of jobs in Florida, and again, it is about jobs in the economy, and throughout the country, and will potentially decimate $13 billion industry. I've heard from fishermen in my district and across the state that NOAA's efforts to manage the fish populations are hurting fishermen in the name of incorrect and insufficient scientific data. Now, I was there at one of the meetings and heard one of your people, one of your representatives say that it was flawed. As recently as February 17th, Roy Crabtree, the Southeast Regional Administrator for NOAA's Fisheries Service, said the latest science suggests that the planned area closure is not necessary for the red snapper population to continue to improve. NOAA website says NOAA is an agency that enriches life through science. Could you explain what science you're using to enrich the lives of fishermen in Florida with these rules to help halt fishing of red snapper, and beyond that, how are you even able to pay for this science when your own budget requests you are decreasing the amount of money being spent on the research?
Congresswoman, the fisheries, especially for the red snapper to which you refer, are vitally important ones. I fully appreciate how important they are to the economy, not only of Florida, but to the region generally. We are required by the Magnuson-Stevens Reauthorization Act to use the best available information to make our determinations about the status of different stocks and to set catch limits accordingly.
Can you please be very succinct, because I have more questions and I do want some answers. But your own people are saying your data is flawed. So if your data is flawed and they recognize it, why are you implementing it without further research? Just quickly, shortly.
Congresswoman, the initial determination was based on information that was available. New information became available that is more current and said that the closure is no longer needed. And so we are doing exactly what we have been told by Congress to do, which is to update decisions based on new information when it becomes available, and that's exactly what we have done.
So are you going to halt the closures?
Yes, it's no longer needed because we have new information, and we have announced that.
Okay, I had another question. I'm trying to get back to it. There's just so much to ask in so little time. There was something in your testimony, I think it was last year's testimony, I'm trying to get to it, about the acidification of the ocean. And I can't find it now, so I guess I'll wait and I'll come back around when we have more questions.
Have you continued? Have you finished? Okay, thank you. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Maryland, Mrs. Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Lubchenco. It's good to see you again, and just want to let you know how much we really do appreciate all of the work of the fine federal workers at NOAA and the work that they do for us. I want to ask you for a minute again about the impact of some of the some of the budget considerations that are floating all around Capitol Hill, and particularly the continuing resolution that passed out of the House. And I know we're continue to work on that, but I wonder if you could share with us what it would mean in real terms in terms of staffing for NOAA, some of the budget cuts that are projected for the agency, and can you confirm that you'd have to absorb the severe cuts that are planned in the budget with personnel actions like furloughs?
Congresswoman, thank you for recognizing our federal workers. We greatly value our folks at NOAA and know what a spectacular job they do day in and day out. Because we are about halfway through this fiscal year, the longer we go without having clarity about what our budget is, the more challenging it is to make adjustments for the remaining part of the year. It's premature to say exactly what those consequences to federal workers will be. Obviously, there are lots of speculation, and even that speculation is very challenging to workers who have great uncertainty about what's down the road for them. So the uncertainty itself is problematic. But because we are in the process of doing various scenarios, various planning, as are all agencies, but it's hard to be specific until we know exactly what the bottom line is and you know what the specific constraints are. I can tell you that it's looking like it would be very, very significant, very serious.
And I mean, the reality is it wouldn't be, I mean, you can't very well cut programs. I mean, obviously we need to continue things like the Weather Service and other services, and so that only leaves people. But that's just my conclusion. I want to ask you, you know, about the end of this fiscal year as we're entering hurricane season. Even today in this region, I pulled up my notice from the Weather Service that tells us that I better be on the lookout for floods in my neighborhood and in neighborhoods all throughout this region. Those are things that we couldn't know if we didn't have the Weather Service, if we didn't have NOAA. Those are certainly things that we couldn't know if we didn't have satellite coverage. And so can you describe for us what some of these the longer-term implications are of these budget considerations when it comes to leaving a gap? I mean, my understanding is that with the cuts that are being proposed, there is potential for a 100% gap in satellite coverage over the long term, and what that means to agriculture, to commerce, to moving goods all around this country is pretty to energy, pretty significant. And so I wonder if you could describe from your testimony that when we vote to cut funding for NOAA, we're essentially voting to expose people to risk, their lives, their businesses, their property, and all the rest.
Congresswoman, the bread and butter services that we provide to Americans each and every day depend on those satellite systems. They depend on the federal workers. They depend on the other observing systems, whether they be buoys or anything else. And those are very much at risk with some of the budget cuts that are being discussed. The quality of weather forecasts that people take for granted today, we would not have that. Should we not have funding for this joint polar satellite system, there would inevitably be a gap. You cannot close that gap with more money. And we would not have severe storm warnings. We would not have maritime forecasts for shipping. We would not have long-term weather forecasts. Search and rescue times would be increased very significantly. Each and every one of those is a problem. All of them together would be very, very significant impact.
Thank you very much, and I'll just close. And I want to really say thank you very much for the work that NOAA does. It's incredibly important to our lives, to our economy, to all of our communities. And I hope that in Congress we actually recognize the danger and the jeopardy that we put in people's lives and their businesses and their communities when we willy-nilly cut the important science, investigation, research, personnel, and programs of NOAA. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of this committee, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Lubchenco, at a December 2nd, 2009 hearing on, quote, the administration's view on the state of climate science, unquote, before the former House Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming, Representative Inslee asked you if there was anything about the CRU emails that affect ocean acidification at all. You replied, Congressman, I haven't read all of the emails, but I have seen nothing in them, in those that I have read, about ocean acidification. It is really not an area that is something that that particular research group was focused on. Your response to Mr. Inslee indicated that you had read at least some of the emails, yet on page 9 of the enclosure to the DOE Inspector General response, it is stated Dr. Lubchenco told us she could not be sure whether she had seen any of the CRU emails or received a briefing from her staff on the results of NOAA's CRU email review prior to testifying before the House Select Committee. Now, can you please explain this apparent discrepancy? Had you or had you not read any of the CRU emails prior to December 2nd, 2009 hearing?
Congressman, to the best of my knowledge, I had read some of them, but certainly not all of them.
Then why did you tell Mr. Inslee one thing and the Inspector General another?
When I was responding to the Inspector General's staff, I said I could not recall if I had read them or not.
Well, the thing says Dr. Lubchenco told us she could not be sure whether she had read any of the CRU emails or received a briefing. Now, I think what you have said is consistent, but the fact that there was doubt about this issue, doesn't that indicate that you really weren't concerned about the ClimateGate scandal that the emails exposed?
I was concerned about the ClimateGate emails, but there were large number of emails involved. And I simply did not have time or think it appropriate for me to take time to sit down and read through each and every one.
Well, why not? Because if the emails were correct, it indicated that the fix was on to come up with a certain conclusion on what the science of global warming was, to the exclusion of scientists that had contrary views.
Congressman, as I think you are aware, every single investigation has indicated that there was no manipulation of the climate information or the climate data.
That depends upon how the investigations were put together. Certainly the emails indicated that when there was a suggestion that people be fired in scientific journal, from scientific journal editorial boards, that whenever there was a contrary viewpoint, the people on the other side basically denigrated the scientific credentials of those who came up with that. And none of those internal investigations actually did the type of peer review that is needed for those of us who are not scientists to be able to reach a conclusion. Now, it seems to me that what you have just testified to indicates a very callous lack of concern over the consequences of what the email said, because apparently folks, and I'm not sure whether you were one of them or not, had already decided the fact that the emails were to be, completely denigrated and not even look for an investigation. Now, maybe all of this came out of the White House Science Advisor's office, because when he was at MIT, his name was on those emails. I don't think you've really blown away the cloud of doubt on it, and I thank you for your answer and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. Recognize Mrs. Fudge, gentlelady from Ohio, 5 minutes.
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Smith, the chairman of the Judiciary, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Lubchenco, I'd like to address my first question to you, and it's related to the BP Deepwater Horizon oil budget report of last year. You're on record, and individuals in your office are on record as not wanting to distinguish between oil that was dispersed chemically and oil that was dispersed naturally. And I have to say to you that a lot of people feel that that was an intentional effort to give the administration more credit than maybe they deserved by blurring the lines between those two different kinds of dispersals. You're welcome to respond to that, but I think any reasonable person would say that if you're trying to blur the distinctions between the two, that's going to give the administration more credit rather than being scientifically accurate.
Congressman, I completely agree with you that it is important to distinguish between oil that was chemically or naturally dispersed. And in fact, NOAA is on record for continuing to want to do that. And the oil budget report that was released, in fact, did make a distinction between those two types of
Right, but aren't you on record and emails with your deputy administrator as opposing distinguishing the two, or you're not?
No, sir.
Okay.
The two processes by which that happened are very different.
Right.
And it is important, oil that was shooting out of the Macondo well
Right.
is naturally dispersed because of the physical turbulence that's right where it's coming out. And use of chemical dispersants
Right.
Also broke up oil into small microscopic droplets. And we believed it was very important to distinguish what fraction of oil came from naturally versus chemically dispersed. And in fact, that's what was in the report, both the initial report that was released on August 4th, as well as the much more lengthy technical documents that provided all the background information. That went into even greater detail when it was released in November.
What percentage was chemically dispersed and what percentage was naturally dispersed?
The final report indicated our initial estimates were that 8% was chemically dispersed. That was later revised upward with more information to 16% of the total amount of oil that was spilled, the 4.9 million barrels, plus or minus 10%. 16% of that was chemically dispersed.
All the government efforts were responsible for 16% of the dispersal, and the rest was natural? 84% natural?
I'm sorry. Around 1/4 of all of the oil that was spilled was dispersed. Of that,
right.
So 16% of 100% was chemically dispersed. So of this, I'm sorry, this is confusing.
No.
Of the quarter of the total that was dispersed,
right.
More was dispersed chemically than naturally. And I can give you the precise numbers if that would be useful to you.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any more? Anyone? All right. Mr. Sarbanes, my gosh, I'm glad to see you. Recognize you for 12 or 15 minutes, whatever you need.
I appreciate, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to wait till the next panel, but I do understand from my staff that you were thinking of having me nominated for the Nobel Prize for Patience, which my children, particularly my two teenage sons, would have great amusement at hearing. So, but I will not take it.
Be a lot better than a bunch of them that have been recognized. I thank you, Dr. Luchenko, for your testimony, and I thank the members for their question. I thank you for hanging so close to the 5-minute deal. Members of the committee may have additional questions, Dr. Luchenko, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments from members. And you are excused, and we'll move to our next panel, and we thank you for your very valuable time.
Thank you, Chairman Hall and members of the committee. I greatly appreciate your attention to our budget.
I guess she thought we could have some voice vote, and she brought her crew with her. I better. You ready to go? Okay, we'll move now to our second panel with Dr. Anastas from EPA, and I welcome you, Dr. Anastas. Prior to his service as Assistant Administrator, Dr. Anastas was the Director of the Center for Green Chemistry and Green Engineering at Yale University. He was the Chief of the Industrial Chemistry Branch in EPA's Office of Prevention, Pesticides, and Toxic Substances. This is also the third time you've appeared before the committee, and I'm pleased that you could be here, and I thank you for being here. As our witness should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes, after which the members of the committee will have 5 minutes each to ask questions. And we ask you to do your best, but your importance tells us that we'll have some leeway there if you want to finish answering the question. But try to stay as close to 5 minutes as you can. I think if I were you, I'd want to answer them and then wind it all up. How about who's next here? Who? Yeah. Dr. Anastas, we recognize you now for your first 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Chairman Hall, Ranking Member Johnson, and the members of the committee. My name is Paul Anastas. I am the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Research and Development at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Science Advisor for the agency. I'm a trained synthetic organic chemist from Brandeis University, and prior to my current position, I was on the faculty at Yale University and the Director of the Center for Green Chemistry and Green Engineering at Yale. It's a pleasure to be with you here this morning to discuss the President's FY 2012 budget for the Office of Research and Development, the EPA. As the members of this committee know, the EPA is not only a regulatory agency, EPA is a science agency. I'm happy to discuss the excellent science that's taking place at the EPA. As millions of Americans are cutting back and spending less, they expect the same good fiscal sense out of their government. The EPA Research and Development budget reflects this responsibility and the hard choices needed to support both the fiscal health of our nation and the research needed to protect the health of the American people and the environment. EPA research is unique. In the environmental science community, we conduct both intramural and extramural research that spans across the entire spectrum of scientific disciplines in support of EPA's mission. And while there are other agencies that focus on environmental issues and other agencies that focus on public health, EPA is the agency, and the federal government deals with both human and environmental health and the intersection of these two areas. The President's 2012 budget includes $584 million for the Office of Research and Development, a decrease of $12.6 million. While this decreased budget reflects the tough choices that are needed in today's fiscal climate, it allows the EPA to continue conducting the research and development necessary to protect all Americans. We will continue to address complex environmental challenges of the 21st century by pursuing the latest science with the most cutting-edge research tools available. We will focus on efforts to understand the environmental threats we face and on the innovative approaches that promote synergies between human health and environmental protection that catalyze economic growth. With the 2012 budget, ORD will do more with less. We work to strengthen the planning and delivery of our science by realigning our research programs so that they are integrated and transdisciplinary. This strategic internal realignment will help us conduct the best possible science to address today's transdisciplinary environmental challenges. EPA will also enhance its outreach to the research community through its Science and Technology to Achieve Results program, the STAR program. This investment complements our internal EPA expertise by tapping into the expertise of academia and engaging the broader scientific community. Excellent research that I may add is taking place in most of the districts of the members of this committee. The 2012 budget request also supports high-priority research areas that are of national importance. For example, the budget supports work on computational toxicology, an area that is revolutionizing the way that we assess chemicals and their potential toxicity to humans and the environment. Computational toxicological tools can help us get critical information more efficiently and at a lower cost. The budget also supports research in the field of green chemistry, an area focused on the design of chemicals that are environmentally benign and less hazardous to people. Green chemistry practices have demonstrated co-benefits in both environmental protection and economic growth. The 2012 budget includes a focus on innovative drinking water technologies to address the nation's aging water infrastructure. Through collaborations with strategic partners, both large and small businesses, universities, and local governments, we will work to develop new cost-effective drinking water strategies. STEM fellowships in science, technology, engineering, and math are also the focus of the 2012 budget. We recognize the importance of teaching, mentoring, and encouraging the next generation of scientists and engineers who will protect our environment into the future. Our STAR Fellowships program will help ensure maximum intellectual capability and creativity are applied to today's environmental challenges. And finally, the 2012 budget supports air monitoring research, which is critical to the development of 21st century technologies that can improve measurement data and address emerging air quality questions. To conclude, I believe EPA has a strong tradition of excellence in science. Today, our expertise and capabilities leave us well positioned to take environmental protection to an even greater level of effectiveness, even during this time of tough fiscal choices. For decades, we have worked to protect human health and the environment by reducing air pollution, reducing water contaminants, and by cleaning up hazardous waste sites. In 2012 and beyond, we have the opportunity to align our research in ways that can strengthen this legacy. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, Chairman Hall.
I thank you for your testimony. Reminding members that committee rules limit questioning to 5 minutes. The chair will at this point open the round of questions, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Doctor, your office has released a draft study plan to investigate the relationship between hydraulic fracturing and drinking water, right?
Correct.
I'm concerned about this scope, design, and objectivity of this study. I understand that the EPA Science Advisory Board is hearing from stakeholders this week regarding similar concerns. True?
The Science Advisory Board is reviewing the study plan this week.
Can you commit to me that you'll give strong and thorough consideration to all stakeholder comments filed on this study and that you will proceed with it in an objective and transparent manner?
We always will take...
This is not what you always do. Will you tell me you're going to do that this time?
As always, we
yes,
will...
you know how to say yes?
I do.
To me?
And as a matter of fact,
never
yes
have.
is at the end of my sentence.
Okay. All right. I understand this study is expected to take a couple of years. Will you also commit to providing opportunities for public and stakeholder input, including from state regulators, industry, and the academic community on study activities after it's been initiated? Or yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll go to the next question. It'll be much easier probably than that one. How will the proposed study take into account whether current state and federal regulations are capable of effectively managing and addressing drinking water issues related to the hydraulic fracturing? Right now, it seems to me that you're ignoring state regulations.
Chairman Hall, this is such an important topic. Let me just say one important thing about it. We do not presuppose the results of a study before it's completed. This is a study to understand what the potential impacts are, and it would be inappropriate and unscientific in order to presuppose what the results of that study is going to be. This is to determine whether or not there are impacts from this important area.
Well, if potential concerns are not examined in the context of current rules and practices, how's the study going to add any value in terms of informing key decision makers like the states?
Key decision makers are going to be involved, engaged in this, have been engaged and will continue to be engaged in the formation of the study design and as we go forward with it. But this is a research study that we are not presupposing the outcomes of the potential impacts, if any, on this important area.
A lot of your plan study focuses on the possible impacts of hydraulic fracturing.
Correct.
With, as I see it, very little focus on the probability of those impacts occurring if current state-level regulations are followed. With 1 million wells hydraulically fractured and over half a century of history, how do you justify not incorporating well-established risk assessment and characterization methodologies into this study in order for decision makers to quantify and better respond to any risks that are identified?
It would be impossible to calculate the probability of an event happening if we don't first determine whether or not a risk, whether or not an event, an impact actually can happen. So while I understand the nature of your question, it is a follow-up consideration after we determine if there are potential impacts.
I recognize Mrs. Johnson for her 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Anastas, I'm a native Texan. We are a stubborn group, and we don't care too much about what people think. But I want to applaud your office for looking out for our future. The Office of Research and Development budget request highlights the administration's goal to strengthen the future scientific workforce by increasing funding for fellowships to students through science to achieve results. That is the STAR grants and the fellowship program. How is the Office of Research and Development leveraging the work of STAR grantees to make progress on the agency's research priorities? And what impact would the House-passed 2011 funding bill have on your research programs? And which programs would be terminated or severely crippled?
Well, thank you very much for recognizing the important role that our STAR Fellowship Program and our STAR Grants Program plays. It's critical to complement the excellence and the expertise in the Office of Research and Development by tapping into the expertise in the broader scientific community. And that's research, as I mentioned in my opening statement, taking place in the universities and research institutes and the districts of many of all of you. In addition, the STAR Fellows are our investment in the next generation of scientists. These fellows, which go through a very competitive process in order to get these fellowships, often become environmental professionals at universities, at the state level, and yes, even at the EPA. And so it's an extremely important role that they play. I'd just say that while we recognize that the proposed budget cuts are broad and severe, it is difficult with the level of detail currently to know exactly which programs would be curtailed or need to be eliminated. But it's important that when we look at the foundation, the scientific foundation of how we do protect our air, water, and land, that the proposed budget allows us to continue that important research, and some of the cuts being proposed would severely impact that.
Now comes the question that reflects on where I'm from. The administration's budget request highlights the Sustainable and Healthy Communities Research Program, which develops innovative approaches to help communities increase their environmental sustainability and resilience more efficiently and effectively. How will EPA ensure that low-income communities are able to participate in this program?
One of the things that has been seen over the past years is that the impacts on low-income communities are disproportionate to the population in general. There's study after study that shows that this is an important consideration, and what we need is the scientific basis for understanding, not just assessing the risk chemical by chemical, but the cumulative impacts on these disproportionately impacted communities from a variety of chemicals, a variety of different substances. And so one of the things that this budget includes, and one of the priorities of this administrator, is focusing on environmental justice and disproportionately impacted communities. So what that looks at is the new scientific tools. As a matter of fact, this past year, we held a groundbreaking symposium on the basic research, the basic scientific tools around environmental justice, and are in the process of developing those types of technical guidance documents for the models, the tools, the scientific tools that are necessary for these types of analyses.
Thank you very much. My time is about over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I've had to run back and forth today between two very significant hearings, and so I will hope that the questions I have in mind are not repetitive of some of the points that you may have made in your opening statement, but I will be reading your opening statement in its total this afternoon. I'd like to ask about the EPA's finding of CO2 as a pollutant and thus a danger to human health. This is something that many of us are deeply concerned about because we find that to be, at least after looking at the justification of that, to be a stretching of the definition of human health to the point that it opens up broad new areas of controls over people's lives than what people really believed as what human health was all about. And originally, that report, the technical support document in backing up that report relied heavily on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In fact, 50% of the sources on this support document either were directly from the IPCC or relied on the IPCC. Do you think that you can rely that much on people, scientists that are not necessarily familiar to you personally, to do something as dramatic as claiming the powers that you that then flow from this decision?
The technical support document that you refer to does rely on a number of sources. It certainly relies on the reports out of the national academies and the National Research Council of this country, the several studies from the national academies.
And some of the national academy studies rely, if you read them, rely on the IPCC research that was then given to them.
There are both original as well as assessments and synthesis. There's also the studies from the U.S. Global Change Research Program as well as the IPCC.
Okay. Well, let me put it this way. After the disclosure of the ClimateGate emails, many of which talked about suppressing dissent, many of which talked about manipulating graphs, and as we know, and one important graph by Mr. Hansen over at NASA eliminated an entire, what they call a hockey stick, an entire description of the mini ice age, and ended up saying that there wasn't a mini ice age. With all of that, the shenanigans that were indicated by these emails, you still think that we can rely upon people who depress or suppress dissent, manipulate graphs, and actually limit and manipulate computer input?
I think it's always important to ask the kind of questions that you're asking, Congressman. What I think we've seen is whether it is reviews from universities, whether it's reviews from even the House of Commons in the UK, that investigation after investigation on whether any of these concerns have changed the science or the scientific conclusions, the answer is definitively no. But I can't say it better than the National Academies said it this past year, and I'll quote, "A strong, credible body of scientific evidence shows that climate change is occurring, is caused largely by human activities, and poses significant risks for a broad range of human and natural systems."
And that climate change is something that now the EPA has expanded a definition of human health to include climate change. Mr. Chairman, I would at this point like to submit for the record a list of the of 10 quotes from the EPA ClimateGate documents, the emails that were made public, that indicate that those involved in the research that is being depended upon were engaged in manipulation of information, of suppressing dissent, and other unscientific activities.
Without objection, they're admitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this chance to get a chance to talk to you.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Miller.
I have never been confused. Have you listened to the way I talk? You think I'm from South?
I've suffered from the way you talk.
I would have thought you'd been comforted by the way I talk.
But you're a great lawyer. I want to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mr. Miller, North Carolina. One of the issues that this committee and the oversight subcommittee has looked at in the last few years has been the clusters of rare cancers in rural areas, the clusters of rare birth defects in lightly populated areas that has to have been caused by environmental exposure. There really is no other explanation, but it's very difficult to tell exactly what it is that led to it. The EPA has had for some time now the IRIS program, the registry of chemicals that are considered to have a public health effect or may have a public health effect. The risk assessment for those, which has come under great criticism, although there are thousands, at least hundreds certainly, and perhaps thousands of new chemicals entering the market every year. IRS has really produced 2 or 3 new assessments a year. And the GAO has had the IRIS program on the high risk watch for programs that simply are failing, and the apparent reason is the interference with the White House Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and specifically OIRA, the Office of Regulatory
Information and Regulatory Affairs.
There you go, what you said. And we have been promised reform of that. And what is the status of that reform? Or what steps are you taking to get IRIS off the high-risk watch list? What are you doing to make sure that there is not political interference by OMB, by OIRA, by industry, or by the agencies that themselves use chemicals that have public health consequences?
First of all, thank you very much for the question and the chance to address this topic, because it goes to the core of the scientific integrity that this president, this administrator insists upon. The IRIS program is extremely important and was on the high-risk watch list because of its importance and because of the necessary changes that needed to take place. The changes that have taken place are a reformed IRIS process that Administrator Jackson put in place in May of 2009. Since that time, the number of IRIS assessments that have been produced exceeds the number of assessments from the previous 4 years combined. We made significant investments in fiscal year 2009 to the base of that program, an increase of about 25% in personnel and 40% of the budget back in 2009. Because of those, the reforms of the process, because of the reforms of the and the investments made, we believe that IRIS is on the right path to being the type of solid program that we can all be proud of. But we agree that a program of this importance, it's appropriate to have the level of scrutiny that the GAO is saying to keep it on the high risk list.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rohrbacher moved into the record without objection quotes regarding the emails from East Anglia. Those have been examined closely by several scientific bodies. The British House of Commons had an inquiry that produced a report that found that there was overwhelming scientific evidence of anthropogenic, in other words, man-caused, human-caused climate change, and cleared the University of East Anglia. That was by scientists. In addition, there was a Penn State inquiry as well that found the same thing. I do not have those reports with me, but I can gather them pretty quickly, and I would like to move those into the record as well.
You don't have anything from Libya?
I did not understand you, sir.
I say, without objection, they will be admitted.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I do have one, which I'll provide now, and I'll provide the other later.
Okay, I thank you. Now we recognize Dr. Harris from Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Doctor, for appearing for us. I have to tell you, I don't always listen word for what our wonderful chairman, when he introduces witnesses, but he did use that word organic chemist in there. And to a physician who went through pre-med, it still strikes fear in our hearts. Anyway, so congratulations for being an organic chemist. Anyone who's been there will know what I'm talking about. Doctor, you mentioned, I'm going to follow up from the gentleman from California. You gave the quote there that said, well, there are going to be significant impacts. But you and I both know what significant means to a scientist means P less than 0.05 at any amount. Okay? And this is, and we're going to get into TMDLs in a second, but with regards to CO2, you see, that's the problem. I mean, look, I know that the temperature is increasing, and I know that CO2 probably has a little bit to do with it. The question is, can we have a significant effect by spending trillions of dollars doing it? So that, in my mind, that's the question. It's not whether we could significantly affect it. Sure, we probably can. We could probably make that much change or that. I don't know. And it's all based on modeling. So I'm going to segue into TMDLs. The total maximum daily loads out of tributaries, very important to the Chesapeake Bay. I just need to know, did your office have anything to do with developing the modeling for TMDLs?
The Office of Research and Development works very closely with the Office of Water and developing underlying science. It is the Office of Water that then is involved with the determination of the TMDLs.
Thank you. So let me get into that, because you say the underlying science, but my understanding is that the Chesapeake Bay watershed model, and look, I've done scientific research. My understanding of science is you go out, you make some observations, and you collect data from a group of observations, and you comment on those observations and then postulate about the possible meaning of those observations. This Chesapeake Bay watershed model is a computer model. I mean, it's modeling, and most people who know computers know you can kind of program it to get whatever result you kind of want. So it's based on, I mean, I think that's true. That's what my kids tell me. So what you've got is you've got a model based on urban point sources that then had to have something called the scenario builder application applied to it to actually go and to look at agricultural non-point sources and then come up with a justification for TMDLs. That I'm just going to ask you, do we have any evidence, real evidence, in any watershed anywhere that implementing a TMDL regulation of this magnitude, because this will cost tens of billions of dollars in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. I have one county alone, $1.87 billion in that county. They would have to double or triple their property taxes to pay for it. Similar to the CO2 speculation. I'll call it speculation because we really don't know what that curve looks like, except we do know it's flatter than was postulated originally. Given that speculation, how do you call that science if what you're doing is you're creating a computer model that doesn't work on real data and has no real data in terms of efficacy to prove that it's worth the investment of tens of billions of dollars? I mean, is this really just based on a computer model?
Thank you very much for the question, Dr. Harris. This is an important point. The Office of Research and Development plays an important role in looking at what the different contaminants are, what the different substances are that might cause adverse consequence to the environment, to the ecosystem, et cetera. The modeling that you discuss is something employed by the Office of Water and making regulatory determinations. I will suggest, just as a general comment on modeling, that validation of models is an essential and important part of the utilization of any model. And so when we take a look at this model that's being used by the Office of Water to make these determinations, certainly sensitivity analysis, modeling validation is crucial. And one of the other, I think, very important points to make is some of the basic research that is being developed is how do we look at the various approaches, for instance, in the Chesapeake Bay, of comparing the traditional, what is called gray infrastructure or constructed facilities to help purify the water, with green infrastructure, the natural ways that the ecosystem does it, and
sure, I understand, Doctor. I only have 3 seconds left, so I'm just going to ask: is there validation, and could you share that validation? Is it based on real observations? And if it is, are you willing to share that with my office? What conclusions you came up with regards to the validations?
I will be more than happy to go and take that question back to the Office of Water and get that information to you.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doctor. Now recognize the gentleman really from California, Mr. McNerney.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if you were going to say I was from North Carolina, but I appreciate that you didn't. Anyway, I have some very direct questions here. How do you think the continuing resolution that was passed would affect the agency's ability to prevent another Love Canal or similar type of occurrence?
The role of the Office of Research and Development is to provide the scientific basis for the actions that are taken, the scientific basis for the decisions that are made. So we know that in general, the types of cuts that are being proposed would significantly impair the ability of our research programs on air, water, land, but it's difficult with the current level of specificity to know exactly which would be impacted at this time.
Well, one of the complaints that the majority has about the Environmental Protection Agency is that it'll cost jobs. But I think that that's a false choice. We can have jobs, we can have clean air, and we can have clean water. In fact, we have to have clean air and clean water to have jobs. So, and also, I think there's an effect that many jobs were created because of the Clean Air Act. Could you comment on that?
It's an excellent point, because we have heard this discussion about the trade-off between jobs, and we know we're all concerned about job growth, especially at this time. When we take a look at the accomplishments that have taken place since the founding of the EPA, the dramatic improvements to air quality, the purification of the water at the same time that our gross domestic product has increased 207% over that time. When we take a look at the study required by the Congress on the effect of the Clean Air Act that you mentioned, that the Clean Air Act would result in $2 trillion of benefits over the course of the life of since the passing of the Clean Air Act amendments, and a 30-to-1 return on the cost of those regulations. That is dramatically that is a dramatic return on investment.
Well, that's certainly dramatic. Another thing is that again, the CR's effect on the EPA's ability to promote STEM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Would this discourage students from getting into those fields, this kind of a CR? And also, does it drive current practitioners out of the fields, of those fields?
Our STEM fellowships are one of the real gems that we're very proud about. It allows students to be involved in this area, and it is extremely competitive. We are able, because of the popularity of this particular program, to only fund a small percentage of those students who apply for it. But those students who compete successfully are the cream of the crop, true excellence, and are the vanguard of the scientists who will inform the environmental protection into the future.
So, it sounds to me like the majority party is willing to risk our ability to protect our communities from toxic waste. They're willing to risk the creation of new jobs, and they're willing to prevent scientists from going into the field, and all because of a few, not a few, but many misguided emails sent by a few scientists in East Angel. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. It's time we recognize Mrs. Adams, a gentlelady from Florida, who will be given some excess time. She didn't get all of her answers last time, but we recognize you for 5 or 5.5 minutes or something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, quite honestly, I've just been listening, and I heard you say it was 30 to 1 return.
Yes.
Do you have what those 30 are? Can you provide that to my office?
Would be happy to. As a matter of fact, this is a report that is required by Congress to be put out on the effectiveness and the costs and the benefits of the Clean Air Act. Would be happy to provide that. And what the number is the Clean Air Act amendments, which are largely known to be among the most expensive regulations that the EPA puts out, also have the highest return, as I mentioned, $30 in benefits for every $1.
Correct, but as a new member, I would love to see that. If you could get it to my office.
Happy.
I was listening to Congressman Smith, and when he was asking about the Deepwater oil spill, and I'm sure you heard the discussion that was being had. And one of the things that the doctor said something about, she mentioned this Gulf seafood and everything else, and there's been some discussion on whether it's safety, whether it's not safety. It's been ruled that it is safety, but listening to the discussion this morning, I wondered if the American people that were listening were wondering if that was now true, based on her comments. But I noticed that there's been, it's been crossover between agencies, and related to the August 4th Deepwater Horizon budget report titled "What Happened to the Oil," an email from EPA Deputy Administrator Bob Perciaspi. There you go. Summarizes comments made by you, Al Venosa, and Greg Williams opposing the idea of distinguishing between oil that is in the ocean naturally or dispersed versus the chemical dispersions, so to speak. I'll say Bob. I'm not real good with his last name, states the physically dispersed versus chemically dispersed has a logical basis. However, that is different from saying it is accurate. He also stated EPA feels the evidence is currently not sufficient to enable us to distinguish accurately chemical from physical dispersions mechanisms. Blurring the lines between, as Mr. Lamar said, what was chemically dispersed and what was naturally dispersed, do you believe the administration, and specifically the administrator that just was here before you, was trying to give the impression that the federal response was greater than it was actually needed? And I just want to note something. There was an email to Bob from her that said chemically dispersed is part of the federal response and naturally dispersed is not, and there is an interest in being able to sum up the federal response efforts.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak to this important question. Couple of things. One, NOAA took on the very difficult scientific question of estimating the current state at the time of where the oil was going, and the natural scientific discussions about the approaches were an important discussion. The one thing
I asked you a question, though, and that was, was the administration trying to give the impression that federal response was greater than it actually was?
No. Let me explain why. Even with that first draft, it would be the exact opposite. If you wanted to demonstrate that the government response was more needed or more effective, the assumptions would have been exactly reversed. The later revisions and refinements of the data increased the amount of chemically dispersed oil, and so the
they don't
first
believe
version
that chemically
was an
dispersed
understatement.
So you don't believe, because, I mean, when I interpret this email, and it says, because naturally dispersed is not part of a federal response, we need to, there's an interest.
In that first draft that you're discussing, naturally dispersed was portrayed as being higher.
Okay.
than
Why are
chemicals.
there no EPA scientists listed on the August 4th BP Deepwater Horizon oil budget report titled "What Happened to the Oil"? There were earlier drafts of the report listed, and at least one, Dr. Venosa, was on that one.
Dr. Venosa was asked to comment on the report after it was drafted. Dr. Venosa, it's my best understanding that he was not involved with the drafting of the report, but asked to comment on it after, and it would, I believe, be.
So why are there no other EPA scientists on there?
They weren't involved with the drafting of the report. Commenting on the report after it's drafted probably isn't the best way to include somebody as an author.
Gentleman's time expired. Recognize Mrs. Fudge, the gentlelady from Ohio, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Anastas, on this committee we talk a lot about innovation and technology development. And much of what we hear in this Congress about EPA relates to regulatory work and how regulations kill jobs and hurt our economy. Last week, during a hearing with DOE, I asked Secretary Chu about how the Clean Air Act has helped compel new developments in clean technologies. Secretary Chu explained that regulations have helped spur a variety of new technological developments. In fact, I have a Department of Commerce report that states that the environmental technology and services sector have experienced dramatic growth since the passage of the Clean Air Act, and by 2008 had generated approximately $300 billion in revenues and supported nearly 1.7 million jobs. I just want you, again, for the record, to talk about the impacts of the Clean Air Act on jobs and the economy, and how do EPA regulations and science spur innovation?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this topic, because I certainly believe that some of the among the most important jobs that we can have is jobs that do contribute to protecting Americans' health, protecting Americans' environment, and you're correct in saying not only has that emerging area of environmental technologies, as you cited, been a $300 billion market, but globally it's projected to be a $700 billion market, which would allow for some of the technologies built here in America to be an export and a growing market. Perhaps one of the most exciting areas of innovation is how we start thinking about our understanding of what causes us concern for environmental and public health, such as some of the chemicals that we use every day and are the basis of our society and our economy. And in addition to getting the deep insight about what makes some of these chemicals cause the problems for our health and for our environment, we are able to take this insight and turn it into design of next generation substances that both increase performance, increase profitability, and are good for humans and the environment. This is the area of green chemistry that is recognized by the Presidential Green Chemistry Challenge Awards, with leaders in industry, small business, and academia showing that they can use innovation to make themselves more profitable while being environmentally beneficial.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you for your testimony, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I thank you. At this time, recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anastas.
Thank you.
I want to go back to Mr. Rohrbacher's line of questioning, and I just want to reiterate some figures. With the technical support document released on December 7th, 2009, there are 35 references from the IPCC and the Climate Change Science Program. There are an additional 43 references for the individual chapters or summary within those 35. There are 5 more studies that were incorporated into Chapter 7 of the 2007 Working Group 1 IPCC report, which again is 35 mentioned, one of the 35 mentioned above. And there are further 29 reports from either the National Academy of Science or from government agencies. Now, the total of that is out of the 146. 77 came from inside the government or from the IPCC or the Climate Change Science Program, and 69 outside. So a majority of the studies were from government or government related because the IPCC is a UN group. Now, do you agree that this is a high amount of dependence on the IPCC?
I think it's important to recognize that the IPCC, and as I believe I have the figure that there's 619 contributing authors of scientists from different universities, from different research institutes that contribute to the IPCC.
Well, I'm asking you whether you think it's a high amount of dependence upon the IPCC and related sources.
I think what we're talking about...
Yes or no?
No.
Okay. What are you doing about ensuring that the EPA's policies are based on a diversity of sources for scientific input into its decisions? This doesn't look very diverse to me, where it's 77 from inside and 69 from outside.
The contributions to these assessments are from the primary scientific literature conducted by research institutes and universities. This is what makes up these assessments. So the diversity is not on the assessments themselves. It's where those assessments compile their primary scientific literature, their primary research.
Well, there have been a lot of mistakes that have been unfortunately discovered, the worst of which was when the Himalayan glaciers would melt. It's gotten so bad that the government of India doesn't rely on the IPCC, even though its chairman is an Indian citizen, and they have one of their institutes outside of New Delhi. So, you know, I think there's at least one government that wants to reach independent conclusions from the IPCC in determining what they're doing. Now, let me ask you, sir, since you're the principal science advisor to the administrator, how can you assure us that the data relied on meets all basic EPA data quality standards?
One of the things that the administrator said to me when she approached me about taking this position was her commitment to scientific integrity and her insistence that I always do everything in my power to ensure scientific integrity. What we have is a framework for preserving that scientific integrity. It involves everything from insisting on peer review of the scientific analyses that are conducted. It says.
I'm sorry, Dr. Anastas, but you know, there was one report that was in one of the IPCC documents that was written by, you know, some student that appeared in a scientific magazine. It might have been Nature or somebody else, with absolutely no peer review. Now, you know, have you gone back and looked at how much of this stuff was vigorously peer-reviewed and how much simply slipped through the cracks and was published as gospel by the IPCC without any peer review?
Of the thousands of scientific studies that are published in the peer review literature that contribute to these assessments, the data that's relied upon or by the agency not only looks at peer review. We also look at review by our Science Advisory Board. We also get input from such bodies as our Board of Scientific Counselors. The structure of preserving scientific integrity is something that's that's of paramount importance to me and of paramount importance to this administrator.
Well, I you know, as you know, I disagree with this administration on the job-killing global warming thrust that I think is been sufficiently discredited that even the last Congress defeated it. But let me suggest you put the wagons in a little bit tighter circle, because you'll hear more about this, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Finally recognize Mr. Sarbanes from Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Anastas. Just on the climate change issue briefly before I ask a question on another line. As I understand it, the mistakes that the IPCC has made along the way are ones that have been acknowledged, that they've recognized, that when you lay them against all the rest of the information and analysis and assessment that has been done, really pales in comparison to the very good work that's been done there. And I just want to commend you and EPA for being careful in responding to criticism of the IPCC to make sure that you don't sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And frankly, having scientists acknowledge that a mistake may have been made here or there, but that the overall weight of the evidence and analysis is still very, very powerful and compelling, I think, frankly, will give it more credibility going forward. And I commend the agency on trying to make those distinctions, because that's how you need to proceed in order to make important recommendations with respect to policy relating to climate change. So I just did want to acknowledge that. I wanted to get back to the chairman when he initiated the questioning on this round, did refer to the fact that the EPA will be taking a look at this hydrofracking issue, and I'm glad that that's the case. The folks in Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay watershed, our radar is starting to go up on this issue as we see what's happening with the development of the Marcellus Shale. Frankly, my perspective is that the industry is moving faster than is prudent in this region right now. There's a kind of pell-mell quality to the way they're moving. If the promise of this is what it's described as by the industry, and certainly there's profitability in it from what I can gather, if it's all that it's being touted as, then certainly we can afford to make sure that we're proceeding in a careful manner, that it's being done right, and that it's being based on science. What I was curious about is whether the study that will be conducted by the EPA will be taking a look at the impact with respect to wastewater, the impact of that being released into tributaries within the Chesapeake Bay watershed, the potential now for there to be radioactive elements is one concern now that's being looked at. Are those all things that will be within the boundaries of the study?
Thank you very much. This is an important, another important topic that is so appropriate when the American people raise these types of concerns, when their representatives in this Congress raise the concern and call on the EPA to carry out this study. We think it's so important. Will this study be focusing on the so-called radionuclides in the water? Yes, that is definitively and explicitly part of this study. Will this study be focusing on the impacts of drinking water and the vast number of questions that we're looking at around drinking water and water quality? Yes. Can this study answer all of the questions that we would like to have addressed? Because there are quite a few that we've been informed about through this engagement with the stakeholders, with the industry, with the scientific community. This is a study that is going to be responsive to the charge from Congress, and this study will inform other research questions, an important question that I think need to be addressed.
Thank you. And then I wanted to just quickly touch on a third topic. My colleague raised the issue of the TMDLs, and I understand that the plan going forward with respect to the TMDLs obviously has to rely to some degree on the modeling that was mentioned. My perspective is also that the kind of data we have available to us now is much more extensive and robust than we've ever had before, and also that we can take it down to a level of particularity that wasn't available before, so that in doing these models, building these models, we do have a robust data source out there that can help promote the accuracy of it, and then again, as is always the goal here, inform our policy going forward. I did just want to put in a plug for the idea of citizen stewardship with respect to the health of the Chesapeake Bay and, frankly, connecting the efforts of ordinary citizens to the TMDL goals. And what I mean by that is I think there may be an opportunity going forward to quantify the contribution of the ordinary homeowner to improving water quality in the Chesapeake Bay. So, for example, if somebody meets a particular standard that may be set with respect to reducing the impermeability of surfaces and so forth, that can count towards a TMDL obligation. We look forward to working with you on that. And I yield back. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. You were worth waiting for. Chairman recognizes Mr. Palazzo, gentleman from Minnesota.
Mississippi, Mr. Chairman, but almost spelled close. Not too
Not
close.
very far from
It's a lot warmer in Mississippi.
Both start with an N.
That's right, M-I. Well, my colleague from Florida started out, she mentioned something, and I haven't been tracking all the testimony today and talking about Gulf seafood. And I'm, for one, being from the Gulf states, South Mississippi, I'm the only congressman in Mississippi that borders the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I have to say our seafood has been tested more than any time in our history. It has to be the safest seafood in America, if not the world, because of the testing process. And our Gulf seafood is not only safe, but it's the best in the world. And I'm just going to tell you how it is. And if you don't believe me, come on down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, enjoy our seafood, our golf, our beaches, our entertainment, and our hospitality that is only found in the South. Doctor, I appreciate you coming out here today. A major concern of constituents in my district is the overreach of the EPA restricting business growth and development. I'm concerned that regulation is adversely affecting job growth in my district and our country. One example of such overreach is the EPA's recent expansion of the interpretation of its authority under the Clean Air Act to regulate CO2 emissions, which threatens to cost our economy $7 trillion in lost GDP by 2029, according to the Heritage Foundation, and hundreds of thousands of jobs. By comparison to this anticipated economic loss due to overregulation by the EPA, what will be the net private sector economic gain, if any, from the $584 million investment stated in your testimony, which basically went research in innovative technologies and promotion of synergies between environmental protection, public health protection, and the pursuits of economic growth and job production by the Office of Research and Development?
One of the things, if I could just say it first, especially over the course of this year, I got a chance to spend a lot of time down on the Gulf Coast, and specifically in our Gulf Coast research program down at Stennis. And every time, I can tell you, I ate a lot of that Gulf Coast seafood, and it was delicious and wonderful, and I'd do it again. So
Great.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we focus on at the Office of Research and Development is certainly not only using our traditional expertise of understanding the nature of the problems that we're confronting, but how those problems will lead to solutions, providing the basic information, the basic insights that are going to be crucial to the innovations that our private sector will make. Very fundamental issues of chemistry and molecular science and ecosystems biology, tying these this understanding of how to be both profitable, creating jobs, while at the same time being environmentally protective, I think is essential to the mission of the agency as a whole, as this administrator has said.
What exactly are these deliverables on the investments? What and if are the job numbers that will be created?
Oh, as a matter of fact, there's several examples out of our Small Business Innovative Research Program. We have companies that have just recently been recognized by the Small Business Administration on technologies. One small business now employing has grown to over 1,000 employees, and looking at range from energy efficiency to water technologies. We have a student program that founded businesses where they're looking at water technologies, where they have both patents and as well as creating jobs and engaging in exports. So there's a range of programs that have resulted in innovations.
Are the pursuits of economic growth and job creation, is that a taxpayer, because the EPA is taxpayer funded, is that a mission of the EPA?
This is getting the synergies. In other words, accomplishing our mission in ways that we think about how it can be beneficial, mutually beneficial, and not in any way decreasing our shared desire to have job growth and economic growth.
Well, I think a lot of people in my district believe that not only the EPA but a lot of the regulatory agencies are going to kill and hurt vibrant industries that are currently in existence today in search of unproven, unpredictable jobs in the green market. It's almost as if there's a lot of people in the federal agencies running around with solutions, and they're just in search of a problem. So please be careful moving ahead, because I know we depend on a lot of those jobs.
I think you make an extremely important point. What we're not looking to do is to drive any particular approaches, any particular products. That's the business of the private sector. What is the business is providing the science that can be used in order to make sure environmental protection and economic growth are synergistic and working hand in hand.
My time's up. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I ask unanimous consent to the letter dated March 10th, 2011 from Deborah L. Swackhammer, Chair of the EPA's Science Advisory Board, addressed to Mrs. Johnson and to me, be included in the record. This is at their request. They couldn't appear. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Thank you, Dr. Anastas, for your very valuable testimony, and the members for their questions. And we've done real good at staying within the 5-minute range this time. The members of the committee may have additional questions for you, Doctor, and we'll ask you to respond to those in writing, if you will. And the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments from members. I have some questions that I want to send you and ask for an answer, and would like to have that answer within 2 weeks if we can get it. And you are excused, and we thank you and the folks with you for your time.
Thank you, Chairman Hall.
We are adjourned.